We're going to start at Galatians 5. It's verse 13. It says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. But do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love." And if you're a teenager, this is something that you're struggling with because you're just getting to that point where you're starting to have more freedom to make your own decisions. And if you're an adult, you've been living this way for 10, 20 years, free, making your own choices. And there's an inherent problem with freedom. And the problem with freedom is this: if I'm free to make the right choice or the wrong choice, sometimes I'm going to make the wrong choice. Sometimes I'm going to do something that isn't wise. And I wonder if anyone in this room has ever done something that you knew was dumb. Like, I'm talking about you had this idea in your head and you're like, well, I could do that, but that would be dumb. And then you're doing it anyway and you're thinking to yourself, well, this is really, really dumb. And then you get done with it and you look back on it and you go, well, that was dumb. I do this all the time. I don't know, has anyone in here ever been to the McAllister's Deli? There's not a McAllister's Deli around here. It's a shame. If anyone wants to open up a McAllister's Deli franchise, I will keep you in business. I can guarantee you that. There are 3 great things about the McAllister's Deli. Number 1, McAllister's Deli has the best sweet tea in the world. I do not know what they lace this stuff with, but it is phenomenal. The second best thing about McAllister's Deli is that the sweet tea comes in a 32-ounce cup that is the same size as a popcorn bucket you might get at the movie theater. And the third great thing about the McAllister's Deli is that they offer free refills. Which means that I will sit there and do stupid things with sweet tea. I'll sit there and drink 2 pounds. That's 2 pounds. And you can do the math on what I'm about to say, but the waitress will come back and say, "Would you like a refill?" And I'll think to myself, no, that would be dumb. You're going to regret this. And the words that come out of my mouth will be, "Yes, please." And so I remember one time I was sitting there and I trucked through 4 of these cups of sweet tea. All right, you can do the math there. I got home and I did not feel well. This was to be expected, but I started to feel really, really bad, and I became convinced that I was actually sick. That this was not just a case where I had drank too much sweet tea, but that I was actually ill. And so I went and I took my temperature, and it came back at 96 degrees. And now I'm freaking out, because your temperature is not supposed to drop like that. I felt fine this morning, and now I'm at 96. So I did the only thing that I could, which was I called Ask a Nurse. And I'm trying to explain to the nice lady on the other end what happened. I went to this restaurant and they had the best sweet tea. Oh, what restaurant was it? It was McAllister's. Oh, I love their sweet tea. I love their sweet tea too. Anyway, I'm feeling really sick, but I went and took my temperature. It's 96 degrees and that's not good. And she goes, "Well, honey, how many of those sweet teas did you have?" 4. By my calculations, that's 8 pounds of an ice cold beverage that you've consumed. Of course your body temperature is going to drop. And I tell you that story to tell you this. About a month later, I did exactly the same thing. I went through it, I knew it was a bad idea while I was doing it, and then I got absolute confirmation, and then I did it again. Because when we're free to make the wise choice or the unwise choice, sometimes we're going to make the unwise choice. The second part of this verse, Galatians 5:13, says that we don't have to use our freedom to indulge the sinful nature. We're free to get away from that. And what that word nature means, it means the same thing as instinct, or the thing that we will most naturally move toward. That's sin. That's making unwise decisions. And God has given us the freedom to get away from that sinful instinct that we have and to start doing the right things. Of course, none of that helps us if we don't know what the right thing is. Doctor, teacher, full-time mom. These are all good things. And if you don't know what the right thing is, then it doesn't matter if you know whether or not you want to do the right thing. And so I had this idea that it would be really great if I could tell if my life was being lived to impress other people or lived for God. Because if I was living my life completely for God, that would mean I was making a lot of right decisions. The struggle is, how in the world do you figure that out? How do you figure that out? Because God knows everything that happens in here, and God knows everything that happens in here, and I don't even know that about myself, and you certainly don't know that about me. The struggle is that we have to figure out how to look at ourselves the same way that God looks at us. And it's tough because we've got these 5 senses: sight, touch, taste, smell, and the stuff that we hear. We've got these 5 senses, and only 2 of them are any good for getting to know a person. Only 2 of these will help you get to know a person. So 40% of the way that you experience the world will even begin to scratch that surface. See, I can shake your hand after the service, and I'll know how strong of a grip you have. But I'm not going to know what's on your heart or what's on your mind. If we're shaking hands after the service and I can smell that you're wearing too much cologne, that's not going to help me know what's on your heart or what's on your mind. And then monkeys do this thing where they taste each other's fur to figure out where the monkeys have been. But we don't do that. All that we've got is I can hear what you say and I can watch what you do, and that might start to give me a clue about what's going on in your heart and in your mind. But it's never, ever going to tell me the whole story. We're limited to experiencing people those 2 ways. But God's not limited. God knows completely what happens in here, and God knows completely what happens in here, and our challenge is to try to figure out what is going on inside of us that's going to affect what happens outside of us. Now, I'll tell you, and this will make sense in just a little bit, that I am not very good at identifying trees by their leaves. I promise this will make sense. I am not very good. I've never had a skill for it. I can identify a maple leaf only because I've seen a Canadian flag, and the rest of it is lost on me. I have not a clue. I had a roommate in college who was good at it. It was like his hobby. He had some really cool hobbies. And so he would always make fun of me. He'd say, "Hey, do you know that tree over there?" "No, I do not." He'd go pull a leaf and he goes, "Look at this leaf, Aaron." I thought it was dumb because I've never been in a situation in my life where I've absolutely needed to know what kind of tree I was looking at. But this was important to him. "You know what kind of leaf this is?" "No, I do not." Now, there are a few trees that I can identify, just a couple. And these are almost all fruit trees. When Lindsay and I were driving down to Orlando for our honeymoon last year, we were driving through Florida, and she pointed out the window and said, "Hey, Aaron, do you see that tree with the oranges on it?" "Yes, I do." "That's an orange tree." "Yes, it is." I can tell what an apple tree is because the apple tree is the one with the apples growing on it, and the banana tree has the bananas growing on it, and the orange tree has the oranges growing on it. And the only reason I can tell is because an apple tree never produces oranges. Bananas never grow on a kiwi tree. And so I can always tell you what kind of tree I'm looking at. This is what it says in Galatians 5:22, and you know this verse. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If this is what you're producing, it'll tell you a lot about what's happening on the inside. I can't get into your soul and see what's happening in your mind, but if I see goodness and kindness, I can start to guess at what's happening in here. Now, the way a scientist looks at a tree is much different than the way I look at a tree. A scientist might take a piece of bark and take a cross-section of it and look at it under a microscope, and he'd examine these cells, right? And he'd start to look at it and he'd say, "There's a mutation. There's a mutation over here, and this mutation is what makes this tree an apple tree and this tree a pear tree." But I don't understand any of that. I think the apple tree is an apple tree because it has apples growing on it. And I think the pear tree is a pear tree because it has pears growing on it. And trees can't fake that kind of stuff. Neither can we. If you have goodness, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, love, joy, and peace, that probably means there are some pretty good things happening in here because there's no other way to get that fruit to happen on the outside unless it first happens on the inside. A potato has never grown on a banana tree. A light bulb has never grown on an apple tree. And these things cannot exist except in someone who has God in their hearts. The fruits of the sinful nature are obvious. This is Galatians 5:19. Immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, hatred, discord, jealousy, rage, selfishness, drunkenness, envy. Those are the fruits of a different tree altogether. If that's what we're seeing on the outside, then that also gives us a clue to what's happening on the inside. And I would like to tell you today that I think the students of Clay Church are producing a lot of good fruit. A lot of it. Now, they're not perfect. I don't think they're perfect. They don't think they're perfect. If you have a teenager at home, you are completely certain that they are not perfect. But they're trying. I'm thinking of the 6th grade refinery class that decided that they were going to support the food pantry, and they were going to bring in 2,000 canned goods for the food pantry this school year. We're a little bit over halfway through the school year, and we're just a little bit over halfway there. They're doing a great, big, God-sized goal. Because we have a great, big God. I'm thinking about the 30 students that I met on a September night in 2008. It was Wednesday Night Live. This is what Wednesday Night Live used to be, about 30 to 40 students. It was a peaceful time for everyone. But some of them started to get this idea that maybe we were called to do a great big ministry. And that maybe if we were called to do an outreach night every Wednesday, that maybe we should, reach out. And last Sunday, 157 students showed up at our Super Bowl party to hear something about God that they had never heard before, because a handful of students caught the vision that maybe we were called to do a great big thing for a great big God. If you were a part of the musical mission tour, or if you saw the Godspell show, you know that this church doesn't take lightly those kinds of things. It would be much easier to put together a mediocre musical. Much easier. That's not the way we do things, because we serve a great big and tremendous God, and so we want to do our best to put on a great big and tremendous show. But maybe the best way I can explain this to you is to tell you a little bit about the bike trip that we took about a dozen people on last summer. I'm going to start by telling you about the hills in northern Michigan. And we're talking about a God who's difficult to understand, and I would argue that you would have to experience God. And if you experienced Him, then you would understand Him a lot better than if someone explained it to you. The same goes for these hills. But I'm going to try my best to tell you what it's like to try to climb one of these hills. These hills almost always start by going down into a valley and then coming back up again. So when you start climbing a hill, the first step is to go down the first hill as fast as you possibly can. You want to take every bit of momentum that you can into that hill. So what you do, you pedal real hard to the top of the hill, then you crouch down, get real low, real aerodynamic like this. If you do this well, you'll go about 40 miles an hour. It's safe. That doesn't mean it's not terrifying, but it's safe. You'll get to the bottom of your descent. You'll start climbing the next hill. If you did everything real well and you're going real fast, then you're going to go about 13 or 14 feet before you have to start pedaling again. It's at this point that your legs are going to start to hurt. About 50 feet up the hill, your legs are going to start to hurt. 50 more feet, they're going to ache and beg you to stop, but you know you can't. 50 feet after that, you're going to start cursing the name of the youth minister who ever talked you into coming on this trip. Then it gets real difficult because you're going progressively slower. There will be squirrels standing 6 feet from your bike that will not be scared enough of you to move. And this is what's really, really cruel, is that you might have climbed 200 feet and there might be 70 feet left to go. And you might be able to see the top of the hill, but you're moving so slowly now that it's going to take you every second as long to finish the last third of the hill as it did to get up the first 2/3 of the hill. Somehow you're going to find a way to the top. You're going to breathe a sigh of relief. You're going to feel this moment of elation. You're going to look back and you're going to see the hill that you just conquered. And then you're going to turn your head around, look down into a valley, and see another hill going right back up there again. This is what we told them before we went on the trip. And none of them quit. Our first training ride, we met at Doug's house and we rode around his neighborhood twice. And people were huffing and puffing and sucking air. And not a single one of them quit. We took every one of them up to the top of Michigan, rode every single one of them back down. And I think if they were honest, there are a few people who would tell you they would have been surprised to hear that they were going to finish it when we started training way back in April. So I'm proud of our students because some of them have chosen to do everything they can do, and some of them have chosen to do everything that they cannot do.